Okay, looks like we're live. Okay, oh, here we come. Here it is. I guess now we're live. So, I guess I have to wait. I'll certainly wait for some of the messages to go out because there's currently nobody watching. I'm hoping for a few the moderators to show up. So I'm just going to sit here. Actually, probably roll myself a cigarette. It's been a while, and I gotta tell you, ever since I've been doing these, this is my third one. And the very first one, seemed like, maybe something wanted to, some kind of illness was vexing me. And then I did the show, and then I went into like a week of pretty rough time. Then I did my last show, I felt much better, and I was really starting to feel good. And then last night, as I'm going to bed, I hadn't taken off my shirt yet, because I sleep naked. And so I had, taken off my leggings, and I was just kind of like, and I go, man, I'm feeling hot in a few places here. Specifically, I was at the top of my legs, I felt my butt, and it was like, how come my butt's so hot? And then I took off my shirt, and instantly I got chills, and then I got under the blankets, and I realized I was running a fairly high fever. So anyway, but I managed to sleep long enough to get rid of the fever, but I feel a little well done, as in the way steak is cooked. Anyway, I see there's 4 people watching. I'd like to say hello to anybody out there, to the 4 people. And as soon as I guess 4 people is the beginning. I'm trying to see if who might be here. I know there's a way sometimes to be able to see who's so it's telling me I have bad video settings, but so far I'm not seeing a problem. Okay, so anyway, now I'm going to talk about plants and planets tonight, and how they, from a little bit of a magical horoscope perspective, and how that despite the, well, I guess I'll just get into some Gnostic background. But before I do that, I just want to kind of put this up. I've been going through the Nag Hammadi texts, starting from the beginning, and it kind of starts with the Apocrypha of John, and I'm really having a difficult time finding much in the way of Gnostic thought in the earlier parts. I got this one here. Okay, what's this one called? It's just I'm reading this stuff, and this is kind of, Middle Eastern, Hellenistic syncretism, and father all over the place. Please read. For the Father is sweet, and in His will is what is good. He is taking cognizance of the things that are yours, that you might find rest in Him. For by the fruits does one take cognizance of the things that are yours, because the children of the Father are His fragrance. I can't go here, man. This is, the whole Father concept, let me bring myself back on. The whole Father concept is a Middle Eastern construct coming from the Anunnaki, and then kind of really solidified in the contract that a priesthood, and dragging a whole, multiple tribes into that covenant with this alien off-being thing that posed as the Father. Now in the Gnostic kind of cosmology, before there was anything, before there was the emanations, there was the invisible, and actually the first part of being in a world that we could observe, like the center of the galaxy. That is all starts with the emanations, and the emanations are androgynous, And so again, the whole perceived world starts with the emanations. And it seems that the first, even Kabbalah, and you know, some people might have reverence for the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is a Yahwist magical system, or Yaldi. I'd really rather use Yaldabaoth, which is the Gnostic word for that thing, for this alien god. And I like to call him, and he is a him, Yaldi, because it's kind of, you know, it's a diminutive, and any lack of respect that could be shown him feels good to me. Let me go check in with my live chat and see if there's anything going. Here we go. Hello, Kalendal. Doc Illusion. Hey, Doc. Oh, yeah. I want to give a shout out to Doc Illusion. Doc Illusion works largely from the Nag Hammadi text, which is, of course, what most of us know. And he's doing it from his heart. He's got some good people he's working with. And yes, okay, Doc, I'd like to be on the show with you. I'm saying it live, and I wouldn't say that unless I said that sincerely. So, Doc, I'm really glad you're here. Hello, Jessica. Hello, Raksha. You know, Doc, I don't think the Kabbalah was cannibalized. I honestly think the Kabbalah was always a magical system from the New Kids on the Block. But that was, I mean, this is something I'd love to do with you, Doc, is, you know, you and I might have different positions, and then in a loving, very brotherly way, we would discuss it, and then, you know, of course, get impact. This is the whole thing where let's meet around a campfire and talk about our ideas. So let's set that up, Doc. You know, as you know, how I was able, you know, there's that about on any of our YouTube channels. You can get messages to me that way. Plus, I'm also at modwiz125@gmail.com. That's my email, so you can use that also. So anyway, yeah. So I'm working my way through the Nag Hammadi stuff, and I'm looking for what I would consider to be Gnostic stuff, and the difference. I mean, the Gnostics. The mystery religions did not worship Sophia. Worship is from hungry gods that are not sustained by the pleroma, that do not they parasitize, and so this need for adoration, worship, sacrifice, and the endless things that actually are needed, as opposed to the more ancient ways where you might put a little meal in front of something, burn some incense. I mean, it's kind of there's a difference between appreciation of the sharing that we do, and the teamwork that is even working at a cosmic level. There's a difference between showing appreciation and worshiping. In one, you're kind of equals. I mean, we each have our responsibility, we each have our domain, we each have our strengths in where we are, and then we work according to what that is. And we kind of just, I'll check into live chat again, because I did engage that. Let's see, Tree of Weird, 9 Veils, yeah, okay. All right, so now I have, I have, so I'm kind of reading, I'm reading through this. I'm looking for something Gnostic, and all I'm seeing is Father, 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 Father. I mean, in this one paragraph, what do we see? 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. I mean, please. And again, this reveals itself as that Middle Eastern kind of Godfather cult, and it makes sense. Where did the Nag Hammadi texts come from? They come from Egypt, which was part of that whole stew, that fermenting, lots of yeast. So anyway, I'm going to keep on working my way through there. I mean, I think one of the most, let me get myself back on camera, one of the most Gnostic things so far I've seen in a Nagamati is thunder perfect mind. And even thunder perfect mind, which I feel kind of represents Sophia very well, and it's focused on her, or it's focused on wisdom. This is the other thing, but let me finish my thought. But you can tell that it's written in after the after Yaldi shows up, because there were certain things about, you know, where she's, I'm the whore, I'm this, all that dark stuff was not part of things that needed to be spoken of. All of the dark stuff on the mother comes from the sky god worshipping people. And it comes from many sources. I'm still trying to look for my Chalice and the Blade, a book written by Maria Gimbutas. And the chalice represents, you know, the female, and then the blade. The blade is how the sky gods show up. I mean, the adherents of the sky gods show up with weapons. They're an unskilled people, except at weaponry. And so, and you know why? They have a parasitic. They take. They don't grow. They don't. You know. They just take. Why? Because they're strong, and in their mythology, strength of the male is just, you know, take it, seize it, do whatever you need to do with it. It's an ugly system. It's a brutish. It's based on force instead of power. Let's see. Yeah, Doc. Well, I'm reading what you're saying, and you know what? This is something you and I we need dialogue, and not just the text. And we certainly have to me a theme to pursue in the show that we do together. So anyway, back to Thunder. If I could cue up Thunder Perfect Mind, I probably would like to read it, but the PDF I have has a terrible table of contents. It'll tell you what's in there, but you can't click on them and get to it. But I mean, as I'm reading through this, as I'm reading through Nag Hammadi text, and again, maybe as you get towards the end, you finally get into something that could be considered, you know, what I consider mystery religion, Gnostic. But the syncretism, the infection of Yaldi, and everything that comes from that archontic insertion into our psyche is just like, I mean, at least in the early parts of the Nag Hammadi text, it's just rife with it. It's really toxic stuff, and it freaks me out that there is a lot. I mean, Gnosticism, you know, Gnosticism. For me, Gnostic is what, you know, is the individual pursuit of gnosis. Gnosticism is an umbrella, and umbrellas, people get under umbrellas just because it gets them out of the rain. I'm not into isms very much. I'm into an organism, something organic, but when it comes to ideas, isms get a little bit weird. I'm not saying it across the board, but as a concept, ism. So I don't like to say Gnosticism. Now, I acknowledge that there is a Gnosticism, and a matter of fact, to me, the Nag Hammadi text, at least the early parts, represent what Gnosticism is. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot. I don't find, so far, I'm finding very little Gnostic thought in Gnosticism. And if that seems a little weird, you're right. So, I'm just checking the live chat from time to time. So I'm going to get away from, since I did not find, I would love to read from the Thunder Perfect Mind, because it's really rich. The book of Thomas the Contender. There's another description, and it comes from the Castaneda books. and it has to do with the flyers. The flyers is the term that the Aki sorcerers used for the archons. They gave us their mind. It's the topic of those sorcerers. And it really gets, it really kind of, to me, is one of the better explanations. It talks about the Baroque, B-A-R-O-Q-U-E, Baroque. The Baroque nature of the archontic mind. And when you when you read the Nag Hammadi text, it is Baroque as hell. It's so Baroque it's broken. Again, I mean, it's a mess. It really is a mess. And I like what John Lash calls it a hot mess. Now it's interesting. The New York Times called the Nag Hammadi text a gold mine of Gnosticism or Gnostic thought. I forget, it's right at the top. I agree that it is a gold mine, because if we go through, there are veins of Gnostic thought. We have to realize what a mine really is. When you pull things out, a mine is largely a lot of rock, and then there's what you're looking for in the ore. So when I look at the Nag Hammadi text, yeah, it's a mine, but there's an awful lot of rock there. And that, I guess, as I drink ginger tea to calm the nausea, as I make my way through the Nag Hammadi text, I will be looking for some of those veins. So let's get into, I don't know, let me just check the live chat here. Okay, Kalendal, go for Baroque. Beautiful. Thanks for the humor. Okay, I'm down to 5. I wonder if I still have Rakshi, if you're there, just put a 1 or something. I was wondering if I have moderators. Not that I'm expecting anything horrible. Excuse me. So anyway, so in the Gnostics are very clear that as Sophia was turning herself into the earth, and the Gnostic cosmology has as part of a triune system, and that's the sun, the moon, and the earth. And I know there is a lot of moon, what I consider to be psyopish stuff about what the moon is. Gurdjieff wrote, called Food for the Moon. It's, again, we come with a lot of stuff that has been dropped into alternative New Age, esoteric thinking, and because anybody can put in an idea, and the thing is, the esoteric community and the conspiracy community have a lot of overlap. Conspiracy community lives for a conspiracy, because again, it's kind of like their food. So if you put an idea like, "Ooh, the moon is fucked up, oh, it's evil," then of course that sounds like it's a conspiracy. You now have millions of people who will embrace that. I'm not saying it's not true. I don't know, but it doesn't really feel that way to me. Anyway, we'll just talk about the Gnostic stuff. So the Gnostics posit, and the interesting thing is, the Gnostic shamans brought back information that the sun initially, was just another star that could support a solar system. So as Sophia is in her dilemma and becoming the solar system, her plasmic life force has already generated an unwanted effect, which is Yaldabaoth and the archons. So as she's forming and turning into the earth, the archons form the solar system, and they form the planets. And I don't know that they get, I did some investigation into that, and you can see that basically the planets were formed to give their ethereal energies a third dimensional sphere to generate their energies. So in many ways, the Earth, our lovely little planet, is held basically somewhat captive by the solar system, by the archontic solar system. And it creates the dynamics of astrology, which is different than kind of sky watching. Sky watching has a whole different parameter. But astrology is totally legitimate because it tracks the fuckery of the planets. Now, fuckery is kind of like the method of Yaldi and his angelic mafia. So, okay, let me see if I can kind of get into this. So what we have in the horoscope is, well, the interesting thing is what you have from the ancients, like, so let's say from kind of Hermetic traditions, you have what is called the heptomad. The hepto is 7, okay? So the heptomad, you also have the ogdoad, which is 8 and other things. They get into all this stuff. But the heptomad is the kind of Yaldi and his 7. So basically the archangels. I mean, when I went to a seminary, we learned invoking the 7 archangels. You had Michael on your right, Gabriel on your left. I think it was Uriel in front of you. You had Raphael behind you. That was your 4. Then you had the other ones that weren't quite as important. To me, these are the archon angels. But the thing is, in the original 7, they had the way they kind of did the original 7 from astrology, because of the not knowing the full solar system, is they included the moon and the sun in the heptomad. And the moon and sun, I feel, are not part of the archontic system. They're part of the organic Gaian system. Okay, let me check my live chat every once in a while. I just want to make sure that nothing's going on here. Okay, Raksha Moose gave me a heart. He's here. Good. Thank you, Raksha. So one of the things they love to do is lie, cheat, and steal. Kind of like our politicians, quite archontic. And so one of the things they lied and tried to steal was the sun and the moon in their system. They're not. So what I did, because when certain things are identified, okay, there's a heptomad, there's the creation of the solar system, and you go, well, yeah, but there's 9 planets. How do we work that out? Here's what I have worked out, and for me, it's not. I worked it out based on what's sitting there in front of our faces. So the whole thing is, we go through the planets, and then we find who the heptomad is. So let's start with Mercury. Mercury is one of the gods. It's the Roman name for Hermes. So it's one of the gods. Okay, so right away, archons. So we now have one. We have Mercury. Then we have Venus. Venus is the stand-in for Gaia. If you notice that all those ancient statues of our Blessed Mother are called Venus, like Venus of Willendorf, Venus. They're not Venus. That again is theft and typical lying. Again, think of a politician. You have the archons. Our political systems are archontic systems. The whole concept of the city-state is an archontic concept. Anyway, so we now have 2 identified. We have Mercury and Venus, 2 of the heptomad. Okay, now we're at Earth. Well, clearly, Gaia is not part of the fuckery. Now we have Mars. Okay, If you know, again, if these names correspond to a deity, then we have our heptamods. And now we have three. We have Mercury, Venus, and Mars. Now we move to Jupiter. Okay, Jupiter, Zeus, Archon. So now we have four. Now let's get to Saturn, that sulky, nasty Lord of the Rings. Okay, that's kind of like, you know, the prime. That's the main creep. So now we have five. So now we move past Saturn, and we get to Uranus. Gee. Where do we find Uranus in the ancient world? We find it one place, and that's before the archons show up in history. And that's in the most archaic of the Greek myths, where there's Gaia and there's Uranus, the sky kind of father, but it's like everything came from there, and it really was tied in with propator, originator. It wasn't king worship. So when we get to Uranus, and we realize that the only kind of place in the ancient world we see Uranus is in that original beautiful kind of configuration, Earth Mother, Sky Father, and Sky Father is kind of like there. All the action is happening on Earth. So to me, Uranus is not one of the archontic planets. Now we get to Neptune. So we have five. Remember, we have five. We have Venus, we have Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. So Uranus seems to be clean. Now we jump to Neptune. Okay, Neptune's a god. All right, Poseidon. So now we have six. And now we go to the last one, Pluto, and we have Hades, one of the gods. We have seven. So for me, the archontic planets are all of the planets except for Uranus and Gaia, Earth. And that's how I see it. And it, let me check my live chat, because who knows, after putting out an opinion like that, somebody might have something to say. Hello, Mari. Okay. So, so now we have the planets, and so astrology, in many ways, is a tool, because it kind of lets you know when squares and other fuckeries are happening, and to me that's where the whole archontic system gets busted, is that what kind of celestial being sets up a system with fuckeries? A system that was born in fuckery. I mean, it's by their fruits you will know them. And to me, it also, ties in very well with the Book of Job. If you haven't read the Book of Job, you must. If you really want to see one of the best good cop, bad cop shows where both of them stink, read the Book of Job. I mean, please see that theater for what it is, because it really actually explains quite a bit, and it ties in very much with what we see in astrology. It's, oh, well, this position is bad. Oh, but this position is good. I mean, it's good. It's meant for confusion. Now, for me, it's funny. Planets is the name of the show. Is Plants and Planets. The difference between plants and planets, from what I can tell, is the letter E. But the beautiful thing about most plants is that the interesting thing is much of the Hermetic sciences, I think, have managed to take the archontic system and make some lemonade from the lemons. Let me check my live chat. Okay. And by what I mean about that is, when I undertook the learning herbs and then learning essential oils, one of the things that really helped me, especially essential oils, but including my herb blends, it is the energetics of these plants and their planetary associations that allows us to do what's the word I'm looking for? Alchemy. Their alchemy. There are certain parts of alchemy to me that really kind of take a situation that is challenging and found the goodness in it. So we're going to let's take an archontic planet like Venus, okay? And then let's look at some of the plants that are considered under the dominion. Again, they're calling it under the dominion. To me, it's not so much under the dominion, is that there are energies that are decent, and these plants have taken advantage of that. So when we look at plants and that are under that work with Venus, we're looking at skincare, beauty, and comforting. So the rose is really considered the Venusian, like, epitome of the good Venusian energy. Interestingly enough, that from a word perspective, that rose affiliation allows us to then identify other essential oils. Rosewood is a Venusian oil. Palmarosa is a Venusian oil. Rose geranium is a Venusian oil. I mean, there are other Venus herbs, but right away there you have a whole category, and every single one of those essential oils is good for your skin. Palmarosa helps kind of tone the skin and also help the skin get rid of toxic products. Rosewood is largely kind of like a plant alcohol, very toning for the skin. It has some some cleansing properties. Spikenard is also considered a Venusian oil, and I put spikenard in my face cream. So we have Palmarosa, rosewood, rose itself. So that's one of the things. So there are let's take Saturn. I'm going to take Saturn for a second because I consider Saturn to be, the most morose, grumpy planet out there. The properties of Saturn are cooling and contracting. So a Saturnian oil is eucalyptus. And eucalyptus has a contracting, very cooling. Now, the interesting thing is, although Saturn would be considered a male kind of deity, the quality of Saturn is yin, because it's cooling and contracting. And it is very cooling. I mean, I would consider eucalyptus to be probably almost just like rose to me kind of epitomizes Venus. Eucalyptus epitomizes Saturn in many ways. There's another essential oil of cypress, another contracting. Actually, cypress is known as for use as a styptic. A styptic, styptic pens used to have when you cut yourself shaving, you put a styptic on it. It prevents it slows down bleeding. Okay, so again, it's that contractile, cooling nature that we're seeing. So there, I'll probably start expanding, getting into some other things. But the whole thing of plants, and essential oils being the kind of the distillation of their abilities, the plants kind of didn't lose their contact with our mother. So in many ways, they didn't have a psychology to be taken over like humankind did. So to me, they're going, okay, so we now have these influences, and of course they arose under those influences. Remember, before the Earth was a planet, the archons were already forming their planets. So all life on this planet has grown up under their influences. But in the plants, what I see is, okay, they kind of said, okay, that's a lot of crap, but because you need to play good cop, because you can't poison, you can't just go say somebody, oh, here's your poison. Usually, again, poison has to be in good drink or good food, generally speaking. You need to hide it in something. So the plants, in their wisdom, went, okay, there's all that shitty stuff, and there's all this good cop stuff. We take the good cop stuff. And so as we plant, so in many ways what we see is the plants as educators in how to live in a system and emphasize the good. So there are, the alchemy of the planets is highly useful. Mars is in plants it can be warming and energizing. And then of course you also one of the basil oil is a very good oil, and I've used it multiple times on stings, like hornets, bees, yellow jackets, wasps, whatnot. I've been stung by those brown wasps. Their sting is so inconsequential, I don't even treat them. I have treated bee stings, I have treated yellow jackets. Boy, do you treat a hornet. But wasp stings, a wasp sting is, to me, actually of less consequence than a mosquito bite. And the 2 times I've been stung by wasps, I actually had a look toward them. I'm like feeling the sensation, what's going on? I had trapped, one time it was in my blanket, I had trapped a wasp, it was stinging me through the blanket. Another time a wasp was on my hip, I put my hand on my hip, and it was like, can you get your hand off me? And in each case I actually had a look. It's like, what is this sensation when I was being stung? But basil is a Mars herb, and then you have these interesting things before Pluto was identified in the Hermetic traditions. Scorpio was considered one of the 2 zodiac signs with Mars, the other one being Aries. So what we do is from a Mars plant we had the association with Scorpio, or a stinging insect. So the whole doctrine of signature is that basil, or this particular Mars herb, was probably good for, in a way, acting against the toxicity of these bites. The other thing is that basil is kind of like somewhat associated with, I will say, the licorice kind of family, because it has something called anethole in it, Anethole, anethole. And in aneth, you see anesthetic in a way. And there is a mild anesthetic property to anethole. Do you ever eat licorice and it's almost like straight licorice is almost like a little numbing sensation? That's kind of like the anethole thing. The other thing about that I've used basil to great efficacy on is the few spider bites I've gotten. Spider poison is, especially brown recluse, because one of the things with brown recluse is that you get a necrosis. So from an alchemical point of view, necrosis, which is kind of death of cells, you kind of have this death energy, which I would call Saturnian. It's very cold, things are dying. Excuse me. So when I look at spider bite and I'm seeing this, what it is excessive yin. That's what a necrotic situation is, like horrible excessive yin. So something like basil oil, which is Mars, adds yang, and I have never had to personally treat a brown recluse bite. I've treated a few other bites, and I don't even know what the spiders were, but the basil worked very well, like almost overnight. And it's really a good relief, and it helps a little bit with mosquito bites. The most, generally I keep lavender. Lavender is good to use with almost anything, because lavender is a Mercury oil, and Mercury is the kind of like as this messenger of the gods. Mercury will fit in anywhere. It's kind of Mercury is the gadfly of the gods. I mean, Mercury herbs like lavender can blend with almost anything. Where there are other, like one of the worst blends I ever did was peppermint and jasmine. Jasmine's an interesting flower plant. It tends to be placed under the dominion of Jupiter, largely because its scent is really quite large. But there's also night blooming jasmine. Any night blooming plant is considered a moon plant. So jasmine kind of straddles this, has some energy to Jupiter, has some energy of the moon. So there were certain ways of kind of placing that. You could almost say, and this is where things can get more sophisticated, where there's two ways of saying it. That you could say jasmine is under the dominion or works with Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. Or you could say jasmine is a moon herb in the sign of Sagittarius. My sense is that it's a Jupiter herb in the sign of Cancer. Now Cancer is ruled by the moon, as they say. So you can so there's some of the ways that you can see how alchemy can work in these subtleties, but you have to think it's a tandem line. It's not right or left brain. It's together, and I think it's time for me to check my chat. Ooh, things are happening. All right. So I'm just gonna return to the chat for a minute because I know I was talking about jasmine, and we'll continue with plants and things. Patchouli. Patchouli is an interesting one. Some people, because of what they call the goatish smell, place it with Capricorn and Saturn. There seems to be something about patchouli that does have a sun type of quality. So in that case, we might have a sun herb in Capricorn. Okay. What if an animal or a plant goes extinct? It's extinct? I wouldn't know. I'm not sure where we would go with that. But if you can expand on that, because again, let's say, greeting, welcome. Yummy licorice, yes. Well, the interesting thing is, there's a great essential oil company out of Texas. It's called Gritman, Gritman. They have really good oils, and they have premium and they have standard. If you want really good, if you're going to do aromatherapy, you need the premium. They were different. If you're going to be putting things in soaps, you can use standard oils. They're really a difference. Hi, Jet Pet. Okay, I'm just catching up with things here. But anyway, she was this woman who owned Gritman, and again, Gritman.com. If you're looking for really good quality, and what's nice about them, you can buy in a normal 10 milliliter size, but they also sell like 1 and 2 ounces. I mean, you can buy. They have very good prices on bulk stuff. And what's most important, if you're going to buy 1 or 2 ounces of an essential oil, you want to know that that it's got the Modern Wizard seal of approval, and I give her premium oils the Modern Wizard seal of approval. So what she told me is that licorice and those associated things are the scent of a woman. Those were her words. So, and I do notice, I do notice that it seems licorice is very popular with women. And I just thought it was interesting for a woman to tell me that licorice, or anise, she used the word anise, is kind of like the scent of a woman. And I realize it in an alchemical sense, because I'm a little familiar with scents of essential oils and women. But we're not going to go there. Quickly checking here. Okay. Where was I going with the plants? So it's like part of what I'm trying to do, at least with tonight, and I can always go back into some straight Gnostic stuff, is I have tried to make Can't You Hear Me Gnostic, not so much of a Gnostic teaching, because John Lash is giving probably the best Gnostic teaching out there. I would like people to be more grounded in that. That way we could discuss some of the peripheral aspects of the central myth that we might want to campfire around. But it's very difficult to campfire with Nagha-Gnostics. And the majority apparently of modern Gnostics are Nagha-Gnostics. And those are my brothers and sisters. Even if I think there's confusion on their path, and because they're reading from very confused texts, they're on the right path. They're looking. The fact that they're looking, and the fact that they're looking in those texts, those are my brothers and sisters who seem to enjoy that stuff. So anyway, but it's difficult for let's call it more of a ancient mystery tradition type person who's really sourcing the roots of this thing, minimally like 8,000-10,000 years ago, and that's when it finally gets when it kind of gets more organized. But there is, and the real difference is that the more ancient Gnostic thought is Sophia based. I mean, Sophia is the center of everything, because that's where we are. Be here now. Where when the Nagha-Gnostics are not getting lost in Judeo-Gnosto-Christo-syncretism, there is still a lot of pleroma stuff going on. It's like Sophia disappeared, our mother is gone, and all anybody wants to do is leave this world and go back into the pleroma. And that isn't how the Aeons set up the experiment. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to do panspermia, and then once you gain the consciousness that allows us and you to actually be almost one and the same thing, it isn't like, oh, we want to go back home. Oh, please, can we go back to the pleroma? I mean, to me, it's a bunch of whiny bitches. In a lot of ways. It's like you lost the plot. You completely lost why we're here. You lost the narrative that told you why we're here, what we're doing, who we're working with, and it's sad. And that's what I'm trying to do with Can't You Hear Me Gnostic, is remind people who are working with the Gnostic thing, we are on a living planet with the Aeon from the pleroma that turned into the planet, and we got shit to do, and it isn't go back to the pleroma. And that's one of the things that I really hear screaming at me out of the, from so much of the material from the Nag Hammadi text is, get us back to the pleroma, this world sucks. Yeah, the world does suck, but the planet doesn't. There's nothing wrong with the fucking planet except that the world that got built on it. And so to me, I'm wondering sometimes if when they're screaming, it's just like that world that you want to leave was the world that kind of got put here by sword. And a lot of it got put here by sword because there wasn't enough, the immune system of our psyche hadn't been built enough. And I do think part of that ties in with how the mystery schools did things. There were the lesser mysteries, where you were taught about a lot of things, including real skills, that produce tectons. Interesting enough, apparently, I know in Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and those different things, the word that gets translated, associated with Jesus as carpenter, the word was tecton. A tecton was somebody who was skilled at something, a master at a skill. So that could be, it could be building, architecture, masonry. It was a skill, a real world skill that allowed us to not have to live in like hobbits. Well, I shouldn't say hobbits. They had pretty nice holes in the ground. To live crudely. The understanding of our cosmology, I think, was largely shared, but it seems as if, again, because of the way people did it, there was a certain building up of understanding before you got the greater mysteries. And then, of course, there was the initiation, which was the introduction through much of the learning, and apparently there was a very unique kind of barley beer, and they used barley that had the ergot mold, which is where LSD comes from, along with some other synergists, and they basically had a form of, Gnostic ayahuasca of sorts. Obviously, it's not ayahuasca because that's a plant, but they had their own. They had their own brew. Down in South America they have ayahuasca. In Middle America, they did psilocybin. In Northern Europe, they had fly agaric, or the Amanita muscaria mushroom. And apparently there was some Amanita muscaria even down into the Middle East, because John Allegro wrote a book on the Jesus being actually a mushroom cult. But the Gnostics the mystery schools had a specific brew that was made from barley, but it was a barley that had been infected with ergot, which is a mold that grew on it. It also grew on wheat. We hear the first about, I think it was during a certain French thing where they had rye bread. The French had rye bread, and the rye bread had grown the ergot mold. They all went tripping, and then in the middle of their insanity, they had the French Revolution, something like that. But anyway, so the Gnostics had a psychoactive brew that was part of their final initiation. It was kind of like once you had that initiation, now you might be a teacher or whatever, but that was your graduation from the mystery school. So, but before that graduation, there were years. I mean, you might recall before the New Age, that was, there was like certain information wouldn't be released until the person was ready. And when I see the complete drooling mess of ideas that the New Age released, you can see the wisdom of not giving people information they don't have the grounding to understand. Because all they're going to do is fly around. Without grounding, all you do is just shoot all over the place. The main grounding, to me, is the Sophianic narrative. You ground into the earth, you ground into why you're here, how you got here, who you're working with, what's out there. I mean, it's not real complicated. The basic story is really easy to master. No, and yeah. Let me check my live chat, because I'm almost at an hour here, and I want to see how I'm proceeding. Okay. So, and I see there's 13 people watching, and I'm quite sure I don't know everybody's name, but thank you. And thank you. I really appreciate you coming to the live stream and just interacting with each other. I should mention that in an hour and 5 minutes, Groovy Bean will be doing her dark brew tonight with Lisa Tenney. And so when I end this live stream in an hour and 4 minutes, or actually probably in an hour, because I'll leave myself 4 minutes transition time, and then I will go join Groovy Bean over at her Groovy Bean Dark Brew website for her Monday night transmission. Okay, where do I want to re-pick this up from? So, I mean, there's some, you know, again, I am really thrilled to hear the word Gnostic bandied about. I'm even thrilled to hear the word Gnosticism bandied about. It's a good sign. And of course the tricky thing is, how do you know, right? But then again, the whole word Gnostic comes from gnosis. And it's not a knowing of everything. It's a knowing from your own place of what is valid. And to me, the kind of rock solid gnosis is the smaller stuff. It's the stuff that you can ground in. There's plenty of things to play with without losing your ground. And that's where I see happening in so far the many Nag Hammadi texts is there is no grounding. There is zero. I haven't read anything. Nobody's grounded in anything. I see the affliction of the father cult all over it, but no grounding. And the father cult has no grounding. It's alien. You cannot get grounded in the father cult because it has no, well, actually has no legitimacy. But it's alien. It's from off planet. How can you get grounded from an off planet being? Now, one of the things I also kind of share with, I think the more what I'm seeing also in a lot of so far of the Nag Hammadi text is what I call Stockholm Syndrome. And if you don't know what Stockholm Syndrome is, you'll have to look it up. But you can see that these are people who are living in a part of the world where a system, a philosophy, a way of being in the world on a planet has taken hold, and it's an epidemic. I mean, we can see in the Levant, in that area of the world, Egypt, Palestine, northern Egypt, the Palestinian area, what would become Israel, Assyria, eastern Turkey. You can see this is kind of like where that cult developed. Interestingly enough, eastern Turkey, okay, so that's, Western Turkey is going towards Greece. Eastern Turkey really used to be Greater Armenia. In the ancient world, Armenia was a huge, huge kingdom, and largely, again, through influence. One of the most interesting, to me, it seems to me it was a relatively benevolent empire, the way the Vedic Empire was. The Vedic, what would have been the Vedic Empire, Greater India, and you can see the effects of this, because again, if you go into Indonesia, you will see Hindu influence. If you go into Cambodia, Angkor Wat, you will see like a Hindu Buddhist influence. And remember, please, Buddhism came out of Hinduism. Gautama Buddha was he was a Hindu. And then he developed this, I would call the most apolitical or it's like this, the middle path. I call Buddhism the fence-sitting religion. It's, he came from power, he came from a kingly caste, and it was just like, what I see is he's going, oh man, it's too late in history, we ain't fixing this. So what do? We learn how to suffer with some grace. I mean, again, it's Stockholm Syndrome shit. He teaches you how to suffer well. Fuck that. Fuck that. Seriously. But when it comes to the Vedic culture, and I really read quite a beautiful book. They had kind of organically through language, okay, and through a belief system, there was what you could call a Vedic Empire. If somebody had some ideas that they would take that empire, the Vedic Empire, there would be war against a in other words, that would be considered a pathogen into an organism, and they would fight a pathogen. But when it came to places like Cambodia and Indonesia, that embrace of the Vedic or Hindu culture was done because it was a high culture. It came with lots of gifts socially, and so the beauty of that Vedic culture was it spread because it was wholesome. People adopted because it worked for them. It was a form of sanity. It was also the sciences. It was a great system. Similarly, I feel that Greater Armenia kind of was this great civilizing system. And then as the tribes were coming kind of like funneling into the Middle East through, I consider that kind of Caucasus region between the Black Sea and Caspian Sea, kind of funneling from the steppes of Asia, of some pretty, of some rough people, some rough people, and people who might be, Turkic language speaking types, and then they start funneling in, and they're quite warlike, and so what we now. So many of things like Catalhoyuk or the Chattel and Gobekli Tepe. When Gobekli Tepe was operational, it probably would have been in what then might have been called Greater Armenia, or at least it for a while it might have even predated Greater Armenia. Then it would have sat in Greater Armenia, and then ultimately would end up sitting in Turkey. Let me check my live chat. Ooh. All right, let's look. Groovy has canceled tonight, and I'm sorry to hear that. So I see. How does one start? I don't know who that question was. If it was directed at me, I would like to know what. Start on what? Okay. Jessica, the reliable. Please buy the book Not in His Image, or go to metahistory.org. That's John Lash's site, metahistory.org, and I think he also has Gaiaspora is another one. So that would be for me. I'm in a reliable Sophia narrative, and he does the pronunciation Sophia to differentiate between the woman's name Sophia, and that's. It just makes things easy. Just like that robot thing is Sophia. In obvious mockery. Okay. Well, Mari, it's funny. The Arabian mysticism or Sufism. Sufism is got again. Look where it developed. Has a lot of Gnostic influence. Among what I'll call the Nagnostics. They point to Sufism, or Sufism, or the Sufis. Because again, the isms, I'd rather do without. I could do without the isms. But they point to them as kind of like a heavy Gnostic influence. But the most heavy Gnostic influence, apparently, in any of those, let's call it, the Islamic stream is the Yazidis. The Yazidis are actually accused of worshiping Satan, and which is very typical of the closer you get to our mother, the more you will be called a Satanist by the father cultists. It's just how it works. So yeah, the Arabian mysticism is, it's quite floral. Beautiful art, and to me, one of the poisonous things that happened to this, to me, to the Levant form of Gnostics, is they're syncretizing with kind of the Judeo-mysticism, which is why they start embracing gematria and Kabbalah. Because especially until you've graduated to the greater mysteries in those schools, you really weren't taught high magical practices. So for a lot of people who were, not in the greater mysteries, there was all these kind of people, oh, I'll teach you Kabbalah, oh, I'll teach you gematria, sure, we'll invoke a few entities. And you will be dazzled and thrilled, and you will be empowered. Wait until you meet these entities. We'll teach you this stuff now. Oh, those Gnostics, they think that you need all kinds of grounding before you're ready to receive the good stuff. We'll teach you the good stuff now. And then you read the Nag Hammadi text and you see all that good stuff in writing and all the confusion it wrought. Now it's interesting that with Persia, Persia is what they called Iran. Iran and Aryan have a lot in common. John Lash posits that the mystery schools had their greatest development in northern Persia, what would now be northern Iran. And that they actually kind of were the dominant thought until Zoroaster. And Zoroaster kind of begins some fuckery. He comes from a kind of what would be an Aryan Vedic family from the upper castes, and of course, what does he do? He introduces this cosmic battle, and of course he introduces Ahura Mazda, who is the father god. And the interesting thing, if you've ever seen the Zoroastrian Ahura Mazda, it's that guy, some kind of Anunnaki-looking god in a circle with wings, which you also see from the Anunnaki. So, and then I tell you, once that symbol shows up, you can kind of, hello Vernon, I saw you just show up. That symbol kind of, to me, is the marker of fuckery. And it's really, it's really funny. It kind of marks where the thought comes out. But it also created that dynamic of two male gods battling it out, and that seems to have then morphed into, certainly influenced Judaic thought, because I really don't want to get into that history so much. But in many ways, so anyway, we start the Zoroastrian tradition. It starts in that part of Persia. And then apparently what happens is that the group of the Magi, or the adepts, one of them decides that they're going to stay autonomous and not go with this new system, and the other ones decide to stay behind and become court viziers and basically do what the priests do best, is get between the king and the people and control both. That's what priesthoods are best at. Doing nothing, influencing the top, influencing the bottom, and basically influencing both to get what they want. Most of the fuckery in the world comes via priesthoods. And that's a conversation in itself. I need to take a breather here. And the interesting thing is, the cigarette I was going to roll myself pre-show, I never got around to. All right, I need to take a break. I've gone pretty straight here. Doing better than I thought I did. Like, and I had like a really, really high fever last night. Slept it away, but I am feeling overcooked. But the show must go on. Okay, chat, what's going on here? Thank you, Mari. Yes, the priest. Yes, the priest. And here's the priest class isn't always so obviously priestly. Scientism is the new basically scientists, especially ones who decide to put on the white thing or somehow look scientific. That's a priesthood. The priesthoods live to influence our minds. They live to create the psychological and real world conditions that feed their archontic world, as opposed to what could be a beautiful organic world on the planet. And I can never to constantly re-emphasize, when I say the world, I do not mean the planet. The world is police, governments, fishing licenses, driver's licenses, taxes, death penalties with official executioners who think that's a profession. That's the world. Planet has oceans, forests, continents, animals, plants, beautiful air, sunsets, starry nights, night blooming jasmine. Hello, Darcy. So that's the planet. And the planet is alive and loving and loves us dearly. It would be really, just imagine that, just play with as a concept, like saying, oh, Rad, this planet's not alive. There's no living entity in the planet. Well, let's just play with it for a second. Let's say, let's use one of the most common phrases you'll hear in New Age parlance. What if? What if the planet was alive? What if the Gnostic Sophianic narrative is very correct? And we are actually just ignoring the intelligence of the planet as it's not ignoring us. And just how almost sad that is. And I just even it's profound when you plug in, when you ground into the planet and into that intelligence and into that love and into that same mind that at one time was in the center of the galaxy, working with the other aeons, planning the panspermia that would be ejected out into the galactic arms and then arise as various forms of life from everything from an amoeba to humanity. lost my train of thought because I made the mistake of talking and looking at the chat, so I had to close that up there. And I'll probably recover my thought in a minute. I'm gonna light a cigarette. Something I usually don't smoke on camera. I've done it. Actually, I have smoked on camera, and then whenever I get the playback, I go, "Oh, please don't do that," right? I guess. It might be pleasurable to smoke, but it really does look kind of silly. It does. Smoking looks silly, in my opinion, and I'm a smoker. Here we go. Although I have been up. I've been up for many hours, and I don't know, this is my second or third cigarette. I tend to smoke less than others. So since I did lose my train of thought, I'm going to go into the live chat, because I really like who I'm seeing there. It's just so nice to see all these people that I get to hang out with many days a week. Okay. Yeah, night jasmine. I really do love jasmine. I also like gardenia, and they're intense smells. I know people who don't like jasmine and gardenia because of their intensity. But actually, I probably like gardenia better than I like jasmine, although I really like jasmine. Oh, that's right. I was telling you a story about two. Okay, Jessica, I'll address that in a moment, and especially because I played with a drummer for over 20 years, and he identified strongly with his Taino roots. He even had a Taino t-shirt. And if I can remember where I went, I might even see. Where was I going? Okay, first of all, as far as Taino cultures, they're very little. I know very little of their, they're actually known as some badasses. The Taino Indians were some badasses. And I don't know that they had a particularly high culture. They might have. Again, they didn't. I don't think they had. Once they got discovered, they didn't get to hang around very long. And as far as Olmec, I would like to do a full reading of the Popol Vuh, which, if I recall, is part of the either Aztec or Mayan. And since they're kind of like pretty close to each other, they have something to do. But it seems, as we can tell, there were different colonization aspects from the Anunnaki, and some of them seemed to be decent, and some of them were quite adversarial. I would call Enki non-adversarial. Please hear the nuance of saying somebody is not an adversary, and don't take that as they're not an adversary, they're a friend, right? No, that's polarized thinking. They're not an adversary. That's what's being said. Now, part of what the Popol Vuh seems to indicate is during whatever spiritual practices they had when Quetzalcoatl, because that was the name he was used, the feathered serpent, while Quetzalcoatl and his could be priests, but again, I don't know what word to insert there. Let's say if the people who officiated at the priest wouldn't be a dirty word if they hadn't been such a bunch of scumbags as a group. But anyway, they honored their deities through food, incense, songs. I mean, just imagine If you know you're thinking about Sophia, Spirit of the Earth, or one of their many dakinis, that's one of the things John Lash does. Kind of breaks down some of the dakinis and other aspects of the Great Mother. Since he has the Kalika War Party, he has an affiliation with Mother's kick-ass side, which is Kali. I'm much more of the wisdom. I mean, Kali is part of him. It's an aspect of the wisdom goddess, and we have to be in touch with Kali a little bit because the planet is severely infected. If anybody hasn't noticed, so it is a real difference between having an aggressive response to somebody doing nothing. That's called warlike, and that's absolutely not okay. But when you're being aggressed upon, that's called self-defense. And to me, it's just very obvious that cosmic ways, some people call it cosmic law, but cosmic ways or cosmic law, if that's the best word for you, says, obviously, or natural law, self-defense is obvious. So when we look at what's going on our planet with all this archontic stuff, it's an attack. So John Lash sees the Kalika War Party as an immune response to that attack, and I agree with him. But as Nietzsche said, beware of looking at monsters or into the abyss for too long, lest you become them. It's a tricky, it's not either or, but once again, when we do that, that caution should always be present. Always. Because if you do not approach the abyss, if you do not look at monsters with that, some form of that caution around you, you will fall into the abyss very easily. I'm not saying you will fall in, but it's very easy to fall in. And there, I hear in some of the language of John Lash, there's a little bit of looking into the abyss. But again, he's decided he's a Scorpio. Okay, so there's some of that. There's that warrior, or at least minimally, Scorpio is also the rules wrestlers. So he's ready to wrestle, and there's some wrestling to do. But we're going to get back to Quetzalcoatl. So the natural thing was, you could sing songs. It was to interact. It was about appreciation for this really wonderful, beautiful setup. This is really quite a planet, and then to have an Aeon with us is like a gift that I guess only a Gnostic appreciates. But the Popol Vuh indicates that basically Quetzalcoatl had to leave, and the reason he had to leave was a priesthood arose of darkness. And despite the fact that we can generally count on the seasons, occasionally there will be droughts. And if you do not, there are ways of working with the weather, but you have to have that. And so anyway, it looks like what created why the Mayans went from songs, plants, and incense to murder, to ripping out the hearts of thousands of people a day, was the priesthood. Priesthoods, yes. And so I think what would often, again, we have certain vagaries. Now, I believe when I'm looking at what I can kind of get out of what Quetzalcoatl taught, Quetzalcoatl did not teach about the divine feminine. He did not teach about the true genesis of our planet. He still represented the Anunnaki. They still had their narrative about who was who on this planet, and Sophia wouldn't fit into there. So because, in my opinion, because he might have been quite a wonderful ruler, person who brought some civilization, but he left out the grounding agent. And without that grounding agent, when the priests came in, they didn't find it too hard, I think, to screw with things. All you need is one bad crop failure. Okay? Now remember, these priests were into black magic. You could create a crop failure, if you're dedicated enough, through black magic. And then your priests kind of come out and they go, oh, that's because the gods are angry. If we rip out a few hearts, we'll get some corn. They kill a few hearts, they start their sacrifices. They tell whatever deity they're working with, okay, let's bring the rain now. And the next thing you know, you have a full-fledged fuckery. And people having their hearts ripped out by the thousands. And it's not hard to do with a simple people, because again, the Anunnaki came with their higher civilization, and through culture, the way they set things up, and also sharing their genetics, things would expand, could get expanded. But because there wasn't that grounding teaching of connection to the earth, that understood seasons, that understood whether and we work together. If you don't have that grounding, and then you have one other group that has some understanding of how this all works, but then corrupts it, you can see how somebody can slip in there and ruin it. And that's what happened. So you go from people offering, some fruits, some incense, a song, maybe a dance to a deity, to, thousands of hearts coming out of chests every day. Similarly, if you don't share your solstice, if you don't share your astronomical stuff, so you as a sky watcher from a pre-sect, even if you're creepy, that based on the records, we're about to have either a solar or a lunar eclipse. So you don't tell anybody. But you tell somebody that the gods are angry, and that they've told you that they're going to make such and whatever celestial body disappear from the sky. And it won't come back unless we start ripping out some hearts. And you can see the setup. You can see what a setup it is. And so that's kind of largely, again, we had very simple people who were depending on kind of adepts who were spreading higher wisdom. And then again, Enki, that's why I say he wasn't an adversary, or Quetzalcoatl wasn't an adversary. But again, it had its own version of what a good cop looked like. Okay, let's look at the live chat here. Jerry's kids. All right. I'm going to go through the live chat a little bit here and try to find out where I left off. So anyway, Jessica, what I was talking about a little bit with the Quetzalcoatl thing is kind of like Olmec-y. And that's kind of like the best I can parse out of that. Jessica, I had a feeling that you might have been Taino. Melendez was a little bit of a giveaway, because a lot of the Spanish names, especially I grew up in New York City. I didn't know many Spaniards. I knew Cubans and Puerto Ricans and some Dominicans. And in case anybody doesn't know, Taino were the natives of the island of Puerto Rico. If that's not correct, if you know differently, Jessica, by all means, put it in the chat. Hey, Speculum. Or hello, Niche. do something with niche here. All right. That's interesting, Jet Pet. You read that the priest gave him an intoxicant that made him do something less than holy. Sounds like again, it's kind of like watching the news where you see one side smear the other. I mean, ad hominem. I mean, look what happened. Look what happened to C.W. Chanter. He speaks about, at least the presentation. I didn't like the presentation. I mean, I'm into divine feminine. To see silhouettes of women in high heels of all things, gyrating around, it's like, oh please. But then she came out and called him a pedo. That is, like, to me, a story that the priest gave Quetzalcoatl, an intoxicant. It's so easy to just create crazy stories to besmirch good, people who at least are neutral. Thank you, Jessica. About the apparently the Taino were over much of the Caribbean, including southern Florida. I thought southern Florida was kind of Seminole, but maybe that's a later thing. Okay. Now, it's interesting about the intoxicants. I don't know how many people have read the Lawrence Gardner material. He kind of, in many ways, there was that book, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, that was written by Bajent Lincoln and somebody. I forget the other name. It was like 3 authors. And that I read that. Oh my God, when did I read that? Like in early 80s, mid 80s, something like that. And it was about Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and basically let's call it what ends up getting called the Grail bloodline. Well, there's a guy who came along, Lawrence Gardner, and he really expanded on. He wrote some really good books. One of the problems is his first couple of books are good, and then I bought every book as it came out, and half the time, the next book was the last book with a chapter or 2 of new material in it. I really started feeling a little bent over and penetrated with his work, as far as what he was offering. It's like, new title, same material, 2 chapters of something fresh. It really started getting annoying. But anyway, he put a lot of information about the various things, how fairies and werewolves. I mean, all these. It was fascinating stuff. But he was a real bloodline shill. There was some guy who supposedly was of the bloodline of Jesus, and he thought he should be the rightful king of the world. I mean, it was that kind of flamity, kind of crap. I mean, I love the books with a lot of information, but where he was taking it was a creepy place. Anyway, but he spoke, I thought, very well on monatomic gold. I mean, one of his books was almost exclusively on monatomic gold, but once he got into it, he really started writing about it, and I'm quite sure he was experimenting with it. And they do show, one of the most fascinating things he wrote about was I guess it was an archaeological expedition into the Sinai Desert, where they uncovered a factory type of place that looks like they were kind of using it to fire up gold to create white powder gold, because they found this. They didn't know what it was, but there was like flagstones, and if you picked up the flagstones, there are these pits filled with this fine powder. And they're seen, so it appears that this white powder, or the shoe bread, or wave bread was another thing, was very popular with the god bloodlines. the Anunnaki bloodlines. And very often, especially in the Egyptian texts, they'd be shown offering them, and they were kind of like conical, little spherical, as if you were to take a fine powder and you would put it on something, and it would just kind of make a base and get thinner and thinner. So this was kind of how that monatomic gold, or that food of the gods, was. Apparently they ate a lot of it. It seems to me, now whoever the Anunnaki were, they were slightly different genetically from us. Obviously we could breed. I don't know if it was a slam dunk, like, oh, just put them together, or there needed to be a lot of intervention to get those initial hybrids. And I don't need them to come from another planet. I'm quite content with them being one of the many other high civilizations that have been identified, like people like Michael Cremo. But there seems to me where we humans are able to use things like ayahuasca, datura, the various other DMT sources, fly agate, amanita muscaria, psilocybin, and on, okay, for us to access the world right above us. So since the word super means above, the supernatural, above the natural world, and that's how we accessed it. I'm kind of getting that those same psychotropics, the entheogens, didn't work on the Anunnaki. And it's always been a little bit of a competition between the archontically influenced and Sophia's own, because we are as they described, we are the luminous child. We are the true spark of the pluralic aeons that has finally managed to get through all kinds of iterations to be able to finally wake up in this kind of form. And ye are as gods, okay? And we are, unless you want to act like demons. Excuse me. So I really think that because what they were using the monatomic gold was they wanted to access this other world also. But my sense is the monatomic gold wouldn't let you access. They couldn't access the elemental world. The monatomic gold gave them the archontic world, which I also find. Now, the interesting thing about this find of this factory in the Sinai, apparently it was attributed to one of the places that Moses might have made his white powdered gold, or whoever that figure was, because the Moses figure is about as interesting as his Jesus figure. But we won't go. That's not part of this. But let's use the Exodus thing when Moses goes to meet with the archons or the Yahweh, and he comes back, and of course, what do? They build golden calf, right? So what's the first order of business? Murder people, because of course that's what Yahweh loves, blood. So people gird themselves with their swords and they go out, and I don't know, what's it, 3,000? I forget. They murder. Obviously it's a blood fest. So after the blood fest, Moses takes the golden calf, quote unquote, melts it down or fires it down into a dust that he feeds to all the people he didn't kill. Okay, so the people who were remaining were all fed this gold powder. And to me, it's almost a confirmation where it's just like, oh, look at this, the calf, they're falling back into the mother. We must get them focused on this plane of existence. Give them the gold powder. They'll perceive the archontic, and they'll see Yahweh in all his glory, and then they'll know better. I mean, to me, that's almost a confirmation to me that white powdered gold is actually how you access the archontic supernatural. Our entheogens open up the supernatural, which of course can be penetrated by the archontic, but it's a different world. It's kind of like a world that gets penetrated a little bit, but it's a lot more wholesome. That's my take on it. You know, it's not the final say, it's my opinion. And I will now check what's going on here in the the live chat. Okay, we're trying to find out where I left. This is a nice chat. I mean, there's good stuff going on here. Hey Vern, I'm glad to see you still here. Okay. There seems to, I mean, I think there's some great stuff in the chat, but nothing that really needs me to respond to. So, well, about 15 minutes left. Better wet my whistle. So how's everybody? Okay, I think I'm going to stop talking for the last 15 minutes. I'm not going to stop talking. I'm going to stop just gushing and try to interact with people. Hey, JC, I see you there, JC Nahundi. So, and I've been following your dialogue and seem to be you seem to be playing nicely with others. There is, one of the things, here's one of the things, since we're speaking just a little bit about, let's say, like, CW making a thing about Pigtail Girl and whatever. This using our platforms, our YouTubes and whatever, as a form of like, hey, shout out, fuck, that is sloppy, man. That is really sloppy. To me, if we have issues with each other, it's time to get to the emails. Let's Skype, let's Zoom, let's, Google Hangout, chat, whatever it is that we can look each other in the eye, hear the inflection and tonality of each other's voice, and let's get shit straight. I mean, most people are really okay. They're not haunted by dark, horrible things that we need to create distance. We all, we can all have our little peculiarities, and we probably make a lot more progress on these things by campfiring. Is where it's let's get to a place where we can look in each other's eyes, and again get that 80% of communication that cannot come across in text. If we're going to optimize what we're doing, we better optimize our communications, and that means text when it's applicable. But if you have something important to say, if you have an issue with somebody, yourself, that person, and the community that we're trying to hold together and stop all of this silliness and all this dialogue about he said, she said. go to the source. I mean, when I one night tuned into a Moose thing and it seemed like he had some issue with me and some other people, I just got on Skype and said to Moose, we need to talk. And then a friendship blossomed. Because he watched my video, I watched his video, and that was how we were getting information. It was just like, no, this obvious already. I made a video, he's made a video. We're already in a septic stream. The only way we're going to clear this up is, eyeball to eyeball, and we did it. And that, talk about fix it. I mean, it was more than a fix. It was it's the beginning of something beautiful, to be quite corny and mushy. And so, this is what complicated things for me with CW. I agree. Again, I really reacted as a divine feminine Gnostic person when I saw women gyrating around, especially in high heels. I really, really don't like high heels. It is the most tartish, slutty, ass rising, not grounded way that women could present themselves. Okay? I mean, I hold the divine feminine. Our energy comes from the earth. We should be as barefoot as not, but if we can't do barefoot and we need something, at least be flat-footed. Being on tippy toes with your ass in the air is for one reason only. Okay? And it's a horrible message. Unless it's you and somebody else. And then, the hell with the high heels. Just get up on, do what women used to do. Get up on, stand on your tiptoes, arch your ass out and go, so how long do I gotta wait, brother? I mean, there is a cleanliness to our sexuality. But, to me, when I saw how she presented her product, it was slutty. It was bringing out the slut in women. Not their rich sexuality, because it might be there. Men and women, Scott Adams did a thing about sexuality, horniness. And it's everywhere from like, all I think about is sex, what's that? And then of course, those would be the polarities, and most people fall somewhere in the middle, to marginally horny, to not horny once in a while. Who cares? There's nothing inherently wrong with our sexuality or horniness, but the marketing, sluttiness, and to me, again, I like the idea of, I'm an herbalist. She shared some of her stuff. It sounded to me like a darn good herbal concoction, and it's not. If you know herbs to make things that'll support male or female and things, it's not very difficult. It really isn't. But then again, there's the marketing, and so from a modern marketing perspective, what she did, my people go, oh, that's intelligent marketing. Again, that's the marketing of the world. And, when women fall under the archontic spell of that marketing to women to be sluttier, doesn't work for me. So I agree, again, I had my issues, but, it's just, that was just my thing. I wouldn't have, this is probably the closest I've ever come to going there. And I'm kind of doing it from a divine feminine Gnostic perspective of like, pigtail girl, that is so sleazy. But I wouldn't make, again, that's just my opinion, but do what you need to do. I can't, hardly, but so for me, again, using videos to do shout-outs, call-outs, I'm calling you on the carpet, pigtail girl, on my stream. Oh, that is so corny. If I really had an issue, Yvonne did a live stream, Groovy Bean did a live stream with her one night, so she has a contact. If I really had to say something, hey Groovy, could you tell Rachel that I really need to speak to her? And if she doesn't open up that door, I might have to go into the public marketplace and shout something, but not until due diligence has been exhausted. I'm trying to make a person-to-person contact. I really don't think what she's doing is all that important. I have things, when you committed to a live stream every day until Christmas, you might occasionally pull something out of the basket to talk about that blows up in your face. And that's what put me in a difficult place. I thought Rachel's reply and accusation of CW was despicable, low-life, garbage, trash. It to me, actually, sphere being alliance type of behavior. And I really don't want to create rumors, but when I look at sphere being alliance and I look at who is part of their kids, Corey's kids, I see somebody who thinks they could probably do a better job than Teresa Yanaros. And Sabrina and Sterling, we won't please. I mean, there were certain people who were, it's actually cruel to say more than their name. So I will leave those young ladies alone. But because CW took her on in public in a way, and he went into a few places that I thought were unnecessary. So I'm kind of like, as he was doing it, I watched that live and I go, CW, you are smacking a hornet's nest. Or you're about to, and usually anybody who smacks a hornet's nest will get stung. And he did. That pedo accusation, again, that is wrong, incorrect, disgusting, low life, cheap, sleazy, terrible. But he threw the first punch. He threw a punch at, his punch, it revealed a sleazy side of her. Now, of course, to me, actually, it confirmed the sleazy side of her, because I think her marketing to women, basically doing pole dancing with a pole in high heels for something to, rise, give them energy. I found that pretty sleazy, but not so sleazy to comment on. But when she went after CW, I was horrified. But I realized CW had thrown the first punch, and he unfortunately threw a punch at a sleazebag that now we know is a sleazebag. And it put me in a difficult place. I would love to just jump on her, but I wouldn't have had to jump on her if he hadn't decided that it was a boring day and that his best way to fill his his video a day was to go after Rachel. I'm not into that. I mean, God, the Sphere Bearing Alliance is loaded with So, anyway, that's kind of like my little bit, because I feel bad. I feel bad for CW. But I'm not going to wait, something like that was a fight. It was just like, no, don't throw that punch, CW, please don't throw that. You threw that punch. And now they're punching back. And you know what? You guys have a fight now. I can't, it's just like, we can't back each other up when things get stupid. I want to back up, but we got to take, when one of us are thinking we're in a group and then they go out and do something without checking with the group and go, hey dudes, now you need to take my back. No, that's not how it works. If you're going to do something that dumb, you better check with the rest of us. Anyway, that's it. So we're at 9. So anyway, the Divine Feminine, I would love to see her, and that's one of the things that I'm actually, it's too bad, because usually I kind of come out of this, and then I go over to Groovy Bean and Lisa, and to me, they represent the Divine Feminine. Because they're, like, when you see everything that is different from men than women, how they treat the same material, they process it a little more emotionally, but it's rich, and it's, to me, it's what the Divine Masculine, why when the Divine Feminine opens their mouth, the Divine Masculine goes, I'm listening, keep going, I need that, I need that. I need that. And they hold their strength while they still show us men that more emotional processing of the same stuff that we do. They laugh. They have a sense of strength, but it never kind of goes into titter giggling. Male, to me, male equivalent would be a lot of guffawing and goofiness. I just think they hold what I consider to be everything I love about my sisters. That I can learn from my sisters as a male. And so it's kind of almost I find it sad that I won't get that hit tonight. Now we also have another person that the next show in our weekly lineup will be on Wednesday night, Nox Mente, with Jerry Cthulhu and Niche. Niche for me is another person that I get that divine feminine hit from. Empowered, wise, and tender. You know, that strength and tenderness, that's a pretty amazing alchemical mix. And it just, I see it more and more, and the beauty is in our little community, I see it the most. And when I mean a community, I'm talking about live chat and everything. There are some pretty amazing women who go into these chats, and as a Gnostic, it fills my heart, and I really love it. So, as we kind of come down, we don't have to, obviously, with Groovy not doing our show tonight, I don't have to close it down, but at some point, we are coming up on the 2-hour mark. And the fact that I managed to get it through another 2 hours makes me happy. That's one of the things when this is my third show. Raksha does 2 of these a week. Raksha Moose, he did one last night. We'll do another one on Thursday. And he's been doing that for months and months. And and it's not until you kind of get in front of the camera, especially solo, where it's just you, the camera, and the live chat. And in my case, I aim for a 2-hour slot. He doesn't really have a specific thing. It runs kind of like 2-hour-ish. And but I got a real it's to sit in the same seat as other people. It might be others think, the show is on. Until you sit in the seat, you realize this is a commitment, and it is more than just talking off of the top of your head. I mean, even though I wasn't feeling well, what I was going to do has been days in preparation. I picked the title of the show 2 days ago, and then once you pick the title, then you start doing the work to try and make it, that it works into the title. And so to kind of, for us to, as a community, just whether we make the content or we show up and contribute in the live chat to the content, this is, I think it's a pretty impressive thing for us humans to do. I think it's us using technology instead of technology using us, which is very empowering. So anyway, I just want to use that. That was a kind of like my kind of male way of not being too mushy and saying I really love all you people, and thanks for being here in the community, showing up, being great, and so on. I'm going to check the live chat again. Yeah, Laura, Laura Eisenhower, it's interesting. Apparently, there's that C60 stuff, the buckyball carbon thing that helps get heavy metals out. And apparently, Sarah Westall has had somebody, I can't remember his name right now, and he puts out, I guess it's the C60, was it purple or something like that? And they gave it to Alfred Webermont. Apparently somebody sent him it's a little bit pricey, so they sent him a complimentary thing. And if you've ever managed to watch Albert for a while, sometimes he hangs up. His mouth will open to say something. He'll kind of go and I think it has something to do with MK Ultra programming, because he's deciding, he's not going to, he comes from a family, and he's fighting against it. So when he's going to do something, initially that kind of program kicks in, he kind of has to fight it, and then he gets it out. In the meantime, he looks like he's, having a moment. So apparently he's been, somebody commented that he took some of that C60, and then in some of his recent videos, he's not hanging like he did. So apparently it's really done some good stuff for Albert. Yes, JC, I've had my suspicions about Albert for a while. Albert's torn. That's why I think it's going to be interesting to watch him after the C60 stuff. But anyway, apparently a few other people in his crowd were given complimentary C60s, and Laura Eisenhower from right here is one of them. And it should be interesting to see whether or not that helps her. But when I look again, at the sphere being alliance and that rogues gallery, it's just like, the company you keep, and so I think that would be enough said. So, if anybody, Albert is quite a dark magician. JC, I think he struggles. I mean, that's what, whenever I saw his jaw hang, I always would listen to see what came out after that hanging. And it always seemed to be something that his programming didn't want him to say. And so that's why, and then it was through sheer willpower that he went through that. So that's why even though I think Albert has some programming, I've seen him fight that programming. So that, so I kind of, I watch him. It's hard for me to watch a lot of his shows unless the other person is doing a lot of the talking, because he has a way. Yeah, Alfred had a stuttering problem, but Jetpack, I noticed that it was always, his stuttering kind of always hung when he was gonna go somewhere, that I think his programming, I mean, he's a judge. I mean, you when you look at where he's been and what he's done, he's a player of some sort, and with discernment, it's all good. Okay. Okay, thank you, Jessica. So, the next scheduled show, instead of being Nox Mente on Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, apparently will be Groovy Beam. Do you have the time on that, Jessica? Yeah, that's a group I don't follow a lot. The whole, never seen Laura Lash Hour. Oh, I've never. Oh, so she went after Joe in the Carolinas? Jet Pet? Is that old news, or is that something that happened a while ago, or is that something real recent? I hadn't heard about that. Oh, okay, here we go. So, okay, so Groovy Bean will be coming, will be on again, will be tomorrow, so that'll be our next live stream in our little group here, and she has it as 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So that is it from her. Let me get my live dashboard going. Thank you, Jessica. Oh, in November. Okay. I really should turn off my screen temporarily. I did, one of the things that was interesting is, well, I know I have a lot of people notice that actually on YouTube, I don't know, usually when you subscribe, so when you're on the left-hand side, you kind of have all your subscriptions, and when a new video comes out, they let you know. Has anybody else noticed? I mean, I'm not the first person mentioning it. Some other people mentioned it, that the content output from a lot of people has really lessened. Now, one of the things that I think is interesting is Rachel used to put out, probably 3-4 videos a week. So, and if you go to her channel, you'll see like, 3 to 4 videos that say 1 week ago. You'll see 3 or 4 videos that say 2 weeks ago. But the video that she put out where she was, when she called CW a pedo, that was her last video, and that was like 6 or 7 days ago. So something happened from all of this on her side, because all of a sudden she hasn't been putting out videos, and it's just an interesting thing to observe here. Yeah, I like Joe. I like Joe from the Carolinas, mainly because he does permaculture. So he. And that's what I really like about Joe. But I like the fact that he does his commentaries. He has those town hall meetings. I kind of like that, that kind of, let's call it like modern hillbilly wisdom that he kind of comes from a little bit. I dig it. I like Joe. I like his channel, and I think it's fun that we're all starting to cross-pollinate a little bit. There is still a certain amount of celebrity kind of striation. That's not the word I wanted. It's where it's a kind of case where let's say like a couple of months ago I reached out to Styx Hexenhammer. This is when I was actually kind of doing something similar to him, talking about what was going on in the news. So I kind of contacted him through the about and said, hey man, I'd love to hook up, do some things with you. And he gets back to me, he said, sure dude, man, let's do that. And so then I kind of reached out, gave him my address, and then I never heard from him again. Said, hey, you said we were going to do something, what happened? Never heard from him again. Found him on Skype, put a Skype request in, never received it. So, it's kind of like almost, I feel that, there's a certain amount of, I have 150,000 subscribers, and you have under 1,000. I don't think we can work together. And there is a certain, and one of our own recently had a similar thing with dark journalist, and where the person again, where there's all this marketing. I mean, do you really think that there's a certain amount of treating this as like on TV, where what is my best marketing move? Somebody like a Stick's going, well, hey, if I talk to this guy, with under 1,000 subscribers, maybe that won't work. And CW kind of mentioned that a little bit. Although, let's see, who is CW? I think I recall seeing CW with Cliff High. I've seen him with Randy Maugan. Cara St. Louis. So I've seen CW with some people who were celebrities, but for some reason he still seems to feel like he's one of the little people. He's got over twice my subscribers. I don't know why. I think seems to me CW gets some decent love. Oh, he's at 2K now, huh? That's about Sticks. Jetpet said that. Hey, it's CW. Well, CW, I can always shut this down so you can begin yours. Do I want to join you? I would need a break. I've been talking for 2 hours. If you give me a little option and jump on there. So that's the only thing. I would want a little bit of time out. And I will be bringing this a little bit to a close. And so anyway, you all heard me say that to CW, right? Everybody who's here watching, so it's not like I can say, hey, CW, give me a few minutes. And then if I don't show up, that means I'm full of shit, right? Well, my reputation matters. Skunk is one of my animal totems. And if you're not familiar with the medicine cards, with the medicine cards, there's usually one word to kind of sum up the energy of an animal. The interesting word that's associated with skunk, the word, is reputation. So reputation, and it's been a bunch of years since I did that cast, and I remember most of them. The one I can't remember, I'm pretty sure it was either moose or elk, is also in my constellation of 7. Coyote was most predominant, and coyote is a big part of my energy. What is coyote? They call coyote the trickster. Trickster in many ways is another form of teacher. It's just not very formal, and that whereas the teacher always maintains their dignity, the coyote often is a little challenged holding onto their dignity. So anyway, I have to also think about the people who were not here for the live, and I now have a 2-hour 13-minute video for anyone who wants to catch up. So I think I'm going to end it for that consideration, and for people who want to catch up, and you find it a little bit easier to catch up with a 2-hour video than a 2.5 or 3-hour video. So I want to thank you all for joining me in Can't You Hear Me Gnostic. And Can't You Hear Me Gnostic isn't a Gnostic teaching. It's talking about things from a Gnostic perspective. I will go into the non-commodity. I will do things that, that are about, where Gnostics get their Gnostic stuff from. But I just think it's kind of it's more useful in many ways. Is like, take different things, even especially the esoteric stuff, and go, okay, here's an esoteric thing. Let me present a Gnostic perspective on this, because we have all these other perspectives, especially the many open source spiritualities. The interesting thing about all open source is all open source has a source code. Many of the people talking about open source spirituality don't have a source code. They're open, but the source code isn't there. So the Sophianic narrative is a source myth. And so there you can have a source code. And once you kind of have the source code, then you can open it up, because then it becomes open source. But you need that kernel. That's part of what an open source thing is that somebody develops a kernel and then it's open for other people to riff on. Anyway, so that would be it. Raksha gave that, and I honor all of you, and so we'll see you next week at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Can't You Hear Me Gnostic. I do love you all, and I thank you for being here, and just a wonderful chat. A really beautiful, thoughtful, loving chat. Thank you. And you all take care of yourself and stay half sane. Until next time.